I'm Andrew Weatherman, and I'm running to be your next DECA Executive President. Part of my platform involves competitive event hangouts. If elected, these calls will be live, where you can join, ask questions, and engage with past DECA Glass winners. With me tonight, I have former three-time ICDC finalist, Wyoming DECA State President, and 2017 Glass winner, Ryley Constable.
Hey everyone, my name is Ryley Constable. You might know me as the 2016-17 Wyoming DECA State President. I've also been a chapter president. I competed at internationals 3 times, made finals and top 10 all 3 times, which culminated in winning 3rd place in Sports Entertainment Marketing Series in 2017. Since then, I've kind of laid low from DECA, but I'm back to help out my main man Andrew and all of his lovely future DECA constituents with regards to making competition great again.
Awesome, thank you. Ryley, you are obviously a very accomplished competitor, and thank you for joining me tonight. I'm sure all the advice you have will be very much appreciated by all the members in Atlanta as they fight for that coveted DECA Glass. So I have broken up this interview into 3 main sections: before ICDC, at ICDC, and after ICDC / next year. So I'm going to start and jump right into the before ICDC. So what do those first-time competitors need to know before they get to Atlanta?
For your first time in ICDC, I think the important thing to remember is that your performance is not always indicative of your own skill. It's important to remember that there's 200 people there in your area, and they all had to go through similar trials and tribulations to get there. And so if you do really well, I think it speaks very well on perhaps your luck as well as your ability to set yourself apart from a field of incredibly qualified people. But also, if you don't necessarily make finals or get a test medal or a role play medal or get glass, it's not to say that you're necessarily a bad competitor or you don't know what you're talking about. It just shows how competitive the field is, especially in the past 5 years especially. We've seen test scores shoot up. We've seen role play scores especially shoot up from like mid-80s to high 90s in finals. And so it's a testament to how great DECA is at educating the next field of leaders more than it is about your own individual performance. That's not to say that you can't set yourself apart and really bring home some glass, because I think that if you do the right things, making finals is definitely in the cards. Making top 10 also in the cards, and getting top 3 requires a bit of luck. But that's sort of the fun of the competition, right?
Awesome. Thanks. What's the biggest mistake that competitors face or have or make when they're at ICDC?
Okay, so the biggest mistake that I would say that the average first-time competitor or even veteran competitor makes is trying to focus too much on gimmicks. The judges in ICDC typically, I can't speak on Atlanta because I've competed in or every other city but Atlanta, but the judges in the other 3 cities, and I'm sure this is going to be a continued trend, is that they're very no-nonsense. They're listening to your plan. They don't want something boring necessarily, but if your entire plan or your entire idea or your entire program is centered around a gimmick, they're not going to be amused with it. In fact, they're going to take you less seriously as a result. And so I would say the best thing to learn is to how to engage with a serious idea in a way that's creative, but doesn't venture into being, a ShamWow-esque sort of something that people laugh at.
Yeah, definitely. Really well said. What's the most overlooked aspect of competing?
I would say the most overlooked aspect of competing is preparation. Because, the average state winner has roughly the same level of competence, but there's, a 2-month span between state and ICDC that really separates the glass winners from the finalists or the people who walk home with an award of excellence. And that difference is knowing that there are a certain amount of scenarios that they'll give you within a certain area and knowing how to handle each one. This isn't to say that you develop a cookie-cutter plan for every stage of competition. If it's a marketing research plan, you want to do this exact thing, because it's also where DECA tries to get the people who over-prepare. There are certain variables in each scenario that need to be accounted for, plans that need to be adjusted accordingly. For example, one marketing research case may require multiple sources of information gathering, whereas one may require, pulling data from very obscure places. And it's important to remember that in each certain case, there's no cookie-cutter formula, but also certain things that you must be sure to account for in every case. For example, if you're doing a promotional case and you don't draw out a promotional mix, you probably won't get a medal or make finals based on that case. If you're doing a marketing research case and don't talk about ways to incentivize, for example, participating in a survey or focus group, that your judge is probably going to wonder how in the hell you're going to get any data, because the fact remains is that these people have very real-world experience with regards to the struggles that plans face. People aren't going to do a marketing research plan or an employee engagement plan specifically just for the sake of doing it or because they're forced to. They're going to want you to incentivize it in some way. And so, what was the original question again? I'm sorry.
It's all right. What's What's the most overlooked aspect of competing?
Oh yeah, that brings me back to where I was at. The most overlooked aspect is having some sort of real world grounding for your case problems. It's kind of soon for this year, but for the next coming year, especially if you want to become a multiple time finalist or glass winner, the best thing you can do is find a real world, for lack of a better term, like mentor, that can sort of give you this perspective on everything that like a high school student would forget about, but an industry professional, what your judge will be, would know to account for, and that's something that'll really impress your judges.
Awesome, yeah. So now we're going to start transitioning to win the competitors at ICDC. So Ryley, I know you are a fantastic test taker. You have gotten amazing scores while at ICDC. What does that glass hopeful need to know before they walk into the testing room? How can they get that glass-esque score?
Well, I hate to turn it back into a preparation spiel, but the best thing you can do is know the composition of your test. This varies from area to area, but last time I checked marketing, I did marketing for 3 years, so I'm sorry for the marketing heavy content. But when I was in sports entertainment marketing, the marketing cluster exam for every event was roughly 20% marketing research, roughly 20% promotion, roughly 15% selling, roughly 10% econ, and the rest was, hodgepodge from every different other competency group in the marketing cluster. And so one of the best things you can do in terms of that and knowing what types of questions you're going to get is sort of knowing roughly the composition of each test. With regards to once you're there, I encourage you to be very active with your test taking. For example, if you looked at my test after I walked out of my test in any of my 3 years, in which my average was above an 88%, when I got a test medal, it was a 94. The last year test scores were weird, but it was like an 87. And the best thing you can do is be very active with your test. When you know a question's for sure, put a big X through it. When you know a potential answer for a multiple choice question is wrong, draw a big X through it. When something's unsure, put a big circle around it so you know to check for it again, and make use of the whole 90 minutes. I can't stress that enough. They give you the 90 minutes for a reason. It's because over time, questions that seemed really tough will slowly start to make sense to you. Answers that at first seemed totally spurious all of a sudden appear to be more clear and maybe the right answer. The 90 minutes is meant for you to be absolutely sure of your answers, and if you're not using every single second of that, you're wasting time that's going to go to a glass winner.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I think a lot of people have struggle with when they do role play is that even at the state level, let alone the ICDC level, is how to effectively take notes during that precious 10-minute window of your prep time before you go in to present. Do you have any tips for that?
The good 10-minute window. This was a big thing that at Campbell County DECA, the former chapter that I was a part of, we really try to hammer out in our students, especially if they're doing a team event. Once you can do a team case in 10 minutes, you got it in 30. And the biggest thing in that scenario is preparation. If you have time to do 2-3 cases a week, if you really want to take it seriously, do 1 case a day, and just getting used to working that 10-minute time frame is the best preparation you have for working with 10 minutes. However, if you don't have the luxury of having a ton of practice cases, or maybe you don't have a ton of time left, ICDC's in a week, 2 weeks?
Yeah, a week.
In a week, wow. I remember those days. One of the best things you can do is, in the time that it takes you to think up your ideas, draw your visuals. Write out your 5 competencies, or if you're in a team case, your 7 competencies. From there, if it's a promotion case, draw a promotional mix. If it's a marketing case, draw a marketing mix. If it's a marketing research plan, write out the steps to it. And in the meantime, think of exactly what details you want to put into your case that make it pop. And then from there, I would say use about 3 minutes to draw out your visuals, and then use the remaining 7 to type out notes or write out notes. And the main thing that a lot of competitors don't do, I think, that you need to do, is come up with a good introduction. And a good introduction isn't one that's super wild and entertaining. It's one that gives your judge, who's an industry professional, a little taste of exactly what you're going to tell them about. For example, if you're a marketing research case, and the main issue on hand is where you're going to get data, cite specifically where you're going to get that data from, and really get them a morsel of your competence and your ability to think creatively in that first few sentences. Because as someone who's judged since graduation, and as someone who's judged for his teammates, and as someone who's spoken with judges all across the nation, the worst thing you can do is have a first 2-3 sentences that doesn't pop, because if not, the judges are going to take you seriously for the rest of the case. First impressions are huge keys towards doing well in these cases.
Awesome. Great. Well said. So everyone that goes to ICDC are superb competitors. We know that. They're here for a reason. So how can people set themselves apart and give themselves the best chance for glass or a medal? And the role plays.
Preparation is definitely a large key. If you're used to doing marketing research cases, I keep using this example because it's like one that a lot of people look over. Then it always pops up inconveniently at state or nationals. Or a big thing is preparation, with a variety of types of cases and knowing how to solve them and account for different variables that pop up in different sets of case problems. And you can only really gain that from practicing. However, aside from that, the best thing you can do is, this sort of ties back with my most overlooked thing in a case answer, is have some sort of real world grounding that's gonna speak to your judge. These people have very real world sensibilities. They like creativity, but they're also very wary of too much of it. And so to speak to those traits in your judge, it's sort of like creating a unique selling proposition that's appropriate for your target market. You want to make it very professional and very grounded in real world wisdom that's going to speak to your judge more than like a creative case would, because that definitely caters more towards like if your judge is like 18, 19, 20. If I was your judge, knock me out with the creativity, but if your judge is anything older, stick with the wisdom.
Yeah, definitely. So how did it feel to win glass, and what was the first thought that went through your mind?
So I had like a 2-year span where my sophomore year I was like, okay, I got first. If I didn't get first, whoever did must have whipped my ass. And it turned out I got 7th. And then my sophomore year, I walked out of my finals case thinking, okay, I blew it. I didn't prepare for it the way that I traditionally had, and it definitely showed when I presented to my judge. And so I was like, okay, if I make top 10, I'll consider this a win. Got 7th again. And so I remember sitting in the event center in Anaheim thinking, okay, good Lord, just don't give me 7th place. Give me 8th, give me 1st, just do not give me 7th again. The last thing I want to do is stay the same like I did the past 2 years. And so when I got called up for top 10, I was like, okay, I want to find out like right now whether it's 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, because I don't feel like waiting another 4 weeks until the full standings come out. And then I was like, just standing there talking to one of the sophomores actually who got top 10 that I ran into during finals. I was talking with him, and I was super proud of him for making top 10 as a sophomore. Then we bump knuckles. Then they get right to calling names. Like in 3rd place from Wyoming, Ryley Constable. Like I was so excited I couldn't even think. I remember just like hoisting that trophy above my head until they told me to get off, and it was the proudest I've ever been in a while. Vindicated might not be the best word because everyone goes for first, but it definitely felt like sort of like a good way to go out.
Your top 3 winners are, in 3rd place from Wyoming, Ryley Constable.
Definitely. I remember the picture of you like smiling with a trophy up there in Anaheim. So let's go ahead and transition to the after ICDC or the next year section. Unfortunately, not everyone that goes to ICDC can win glass or even win top 10 or international finalists. Do you have any motivation or tips from them to kind of get back in the swing and be eager for next year?
I would say, I can't remember if this quote is from the Wu-Tang Clan or from Winston Churchill, but it's that success is not final and failure isn't fatal. What matters is the courage to continue. I think that's Winston Churchill, but the Wu-Tang Clan says something similar. Not important. I would say that if you don't win, whether not winning to you means getting 2nd or getting, last in your heat, it's important to remember that unless you're a senior, that isn't your last ICDC. And I think you should look back on that failure as a way to fuel you for the future. I remember my sophomore year, we made finals just because I had a really good team dynamic. I did sports and entertainment marketing team. We worked really well together. I was with a really good senior. And I feel like our energy really radiated with judges a lot. And then sophomore year, or junior year, I didn't really practice as much as I thought I did because I was kind of resting on my laurels. And then getting 7th again really disappointed me a lot. And so I think getting 7th that year was the best thing that could happen to me, perhaps better than winning 1st that year, on the basis that every time I looked at a DECA case or a DECA exam, I looked at it and said, okay, last thing I want to do is do what I did last year and get 7th again. Because, getting 7th 3 times in a row is like a little bit too much of a fluke, as well as the fact that, you either want to progress or regress. Maybe I'm being irrational in that example, but the big takeaway from this is that for example, you'll get into competitive events transcript, whether your state buys them for you or you have to buy them yourself. They're really revealing with regards to what you need to improve on, because the judges first score you, and then the score is converted to a percentile, comparing how you did relative to everyone else in your heat and everyone else in your event. And it's adjusted for scores, so like if one judge scores higher than the other, they accommodate for that using math somehow. I don't know, I'm not a math major. And then from there, they tell you whether or not you met the competency mark. how well you did relative to your peers, and they used to give judges feedback, but they don't anymore, which is kind of sad. And then they contextualize your exam, tell you exactly what percentage you got on your exam with regards to every competency area. And so from there, it's good for identifying your weak points, as well as figuring out how good you are at judging your own abilities. Because that was a big thing for me. I always kind of like was a little overconfident. I think everyone is at some point. And I fooled myself into thinking that I was a lot better at a lot of aspects of competition than I really was. And getting my test transcript, for example, back when I was a sophomore, really opened my eyes to areas where I needed to improve. And so the big lesson is, out of ICDC, you either get a lesson or glass, and in some cases it's better to get the former.
Definitely. Can't agree more than that. So, picking event is key. If you pick the wrong event, you're not going to do well naturally. So how should members pick their event, and is it better to do a larger event or a smaller event at your state level? Because, of course, ICDC, the event sizes are the same.
I would say the best advice that I can give in picking your event is picking a balance of what's interesting to you and what your industry professionals in your area and your teacher can teach you well. For example, I had the benefit of having a marketing teacher who's had 45 plus students win first place and another 100 win glass of some form in her 35 years of teaching DECA. And that goes back to like the 1989 ICDC. I think back then it was just the national CDC. And so she had a very superb background in marketing and hospitality. Before she started teaching, she ran a restaurant for 15 years and it was regularly rated the best in Wyoming. And so one of the best things that I did was get involved mainly with marketing. But the marketing event of sports entertainment also has a strong intersection with hospitality in a degree, because event planning and hospitality are basically the same thing. And so I sort of stumbled upon it by chance, but looking back, I'm glad that I kind of went down that path. The worst thing that you can do is put yourself in an area where your teacher is not equipped to help you with it. For example, my teacher, she has a good background in finance, but she's not good at teaching it necessarily. And so I had a couple classmates every year who would want to go down the path of finance because it's like, the quote from Step Brothers, I want to drive a Range Rover, I want to make bank. But they really weren't in a position where they could succeed at it internationally. And so the big key is first finding out like what your teachers can offer you in terms of education, as well as people from your area. The people who run events and sporting events in my hometown were also very accessible for advice on things. And so that gave me a competitive advantage because, like I said earlier, my cases became grounded in a certain traditional wisdom that kind of transcends any sort of marketing textbook that you can pick up. And so with regards to that, pick to your strengths. It's sort of like the theory of comparative advantage.
Yeah.
And then with regards to a big event or a small event, I think if your goal is to be competitive internationally, you should not think in terms of how well you'll do at state. Because, I mean, if you're not competitive at your state level, why do you think you'd be competitive internationally? The worst thing you can do is like pick something that's an easy cop to ICDC and then trying to cram like years worth of material into like 2 months, because there's students all across the nation, specifically Ontario, that have been going to like a specialized high school. They've got 2+ years of experience in the event by the time they get to ICDC, and you really just can't make that up in a couple months. So I think at the beginning of the year you need to make like a year-long plan with regards to what area you're going to pick based on the strengths of your teacher, the strengths of the people in your area, and realistically something that you'd be interested in. Because I'm not saying you should pick finance if your teacher's good at it, if you absolutely hate it, but you should try to find something that both your teacher's good at and you like.
Awesome, of course. So do you have any resource of, DECA has a ton of resources. What resources did you use when you won top 10 3 times at ICDC? Do you have any advice for picking resources?
Absolutely. So DECA offers like a book with the marketing exam from ICDC that year, and then I think the 3 to 4 cases from state. And the best thing you can do is buy as many of those books in your area as possible, and then see where you can hunt down the older cases from the previous years. For example, one of my greatest resources was that I bought all those books. I ran through those cases. I bought other events cases that were similar to sports and entertainment. For example, you have like pathways within a certain career cluster, and sports and entertainment marketing is in the marketing management pathway. And so I got all the old marketing management cases before they switched events to marketing communications for all the old heads out here. I picked up as many cases within automotive marketing. I believe that's in the marketing management pathway. And even though the little specifics might be different, the overarching themes are the same. And so the biggest thing you can do is practice as many cases as you can and absolutely perfect them. Present them to the toughest, grader on your team or your toughest grading advisor until they have absolutely zero inhibitions towards giving you 100 on that case. So that was a big thing for me. My advisor has been teaching this for 35 years, and so she knew exactly what to look for. But if you don't know what to look for a case that has a lot of details. The last thing you want to give is a bunch of vague platitudes about what we should do instead of a distinct plan. 2, have a plan that utilizes those details. Say exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. And then from there, have something creative but not gimmicky. Something that's going to catch attention, but it's also going to show your wisdom and your experience in the area.
Definitely. Okay. Do you have any additional advice, tips, or anything else to say?
I can't reiterate the importance enough of not deriving your value as a competitor from how well you do at ICDC. I had a lot of friends of mine that, were always just knocking on the door of getting into finals but never quite got there, or, were really close to glass but didn't quite get there. And they began to worry that, they weren't good at DECA. And I think just making it to ICDC is a huge testament to your ability as a competitor. And so I'm not telling you to be complacent with being average, but I do think, though, that just making it to ICDC inspires a certain amount of applause for your abilities as a competitor. And if you don't win, it's not necessarily because you're bad. You may have just had a tough heat. For example, if you get in a heat with 2 Ontario kids, it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle. I was lucky. I only had 1 Ontario kid in my heat all 3 years. But, a lot of this is luck related. Judges, even though you may be grounded in good wisdom, they might find your creative aspect a little less appealing than the guy who went right after his creative aspect. Or, you might get put in a heat with a lot of tough kids, or the exam might be, the 3 or 4 things you didn't study. And in the case of DECA ICDC, 3 to 4 points is the difference between making finals and getting an award of excellence.
Definitely.
So, Ryley, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm sure your limitless advice will help members get ready for it, and I can't wait to see all of you lift glass in just a few days. If you enjoyed this video and want more, vote Andrew Weatherman for DECA Executive President, or ask your association's delegates to vote me come Tuesday. Again, Ryley, thank you so much for joining me in the call, and best of luck in your finals.
Thank you very much, Andrew. To any potential voters out there watching, whether you're a delegate or someone close to a delegate who can influence decisions, I can't stress enough Andrew's extreme competence as both a competitor and an officer. Andrew is the type of person who both knows exactly how to inspire people to get things done, while also setting an incredible example of how to get things done himself. He would never ask anything out of his colleagues or people working for him that he wouldn't do himself, and I think that sets him up as an incredible leader for that reason. There are times where he's blown me away with his creativity, and especially with this campaign, his entire theme this campaign has blown me out of the water. Not just in his creativity, but with his attention to detail, and his ability to truly think of propositions for the coming DECA future that the DECA Executive Board will hop on board with, as well as will be popular with the next generation of DECA students.
Thank you so much, Ryley. That means a lot, man. See you later.
Thank you. Take care, Andrew.